There are millions of podcasts being done all over the world that take on the personalities of their creator. Some bring in thousands of listeners each week. Some bring in large amounts of revenue, while others entertain millions and help sell products. If you're like many podcasters, you want to reach your maximum potential. But how? How do you make your podcast stand out from all the rest? Join Dr. Barrett Matthews as he talks to experts who are doing it on The Productive Podcaster. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Productive Podcaster. I am Dr. Barrett Matthews, and if this is your first time listening, or if you've been listening for a while, I want you to do one thing. I want you to share this out. I want you to let everyone know that you're listening to The Productive Podcaster and have them subscribe. Make sure they subscribe to the show. Now, what is The Productive Podcaster? Some of you may be wondering that. Well, what I have done is I've put together a podcast to help you if you want to be a podcaster, or if you're already a podcaster and you want some more ideas, you want some tips and so forth. So what I've done is I have put together an ensemble of guests that I bring on and let them tell you what it takes to have a productive podcast and how they've done it. And so maybe you could take some of those tips as well. So one of the things I do before I start every show, or actually when I start every show, to be honest with you, is I do a segment called Pros and Cons. Pros and Cons. Now, you're probably wondering, what is pros and cons? Pros and cons is actually me giving you a professional tip on how to be a productive podcaster. And today, we're talking about the subject of giving them a reason to listen. Yeah, give them a reason to listen, because a lot of people, they want to start a podcast because they just like talking. But you have to understand that your podcast has to be about your audience, not about you. It cannot be just on what they want, what you think they want to hear. It has to be what it is that they want to hear. So understand that. Give them a reason to want to listen. Find out what they want. Give them a reason. Give them something poignant that they really want to stick to, they want to hold on to. Give them a reason to want to listen to your podcast other than everyone else's, okay? That is pros and cons for today. Now, we're going to take a break here. When I come back, I'm coming back with the fantastic Liz Lawless, and she's going to talk to us about her podcast. So we'll be right back right after this.
You've heard the rumblings. You even thought about starting your own. But how? Everybody knows podcasting is the fastest and best way to get your message out and grow your business all at once. Although everybody knows this, nobody showed you what to do. Well, Podcast Nation is ready to do all the heavy lifting for you while you just deliver your message and grow. Join the nation and start your podcast today. Text podcast to 929-244-4323 and make them hear your voice.
Do you hear what I hear? That's the sound of your tribe, your audience, your people. That's the sound of your nation. The people who love to hear the sound of your voice as you bring your special message to them in your very own podcast. How do you get it to them? Let us handle that. We're Podcast Nation, and we make sure they hear your voice. Podcast Nation is a full-service podcasting firm that does all of the hard work for you so that you can be the talent and get your message to your people. Just text podcast to 929-244-4323 and talk to one of our staff on how you can get started with your very own done-for-you podcast. Or go to podcastnation.com and get started today. That's PODCAST nation.com. Your people are waiting on you. Make them hear your voice. Podcast Nation.
All right, everybody, welcome back to The Productive Podcast. I'm Dr. Barrett Matthews. I told you I have a special guest. Liz Lawless is here right now. Her podcast, Creative Passions Results. I'm excited to hear about that and to learn all about it, because guess what, guys? We all have some creative passions and we want some results. So we want to find out how Liz can help us do that with her podcast. So I want to bring to the Productive Podcaster right now, none other than Liz Lawless. Liz, welcome to the Productive Podcaster. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Dr. Matthews. I appreciate you having me on so much. It's a real pleasure.
Oh, man, it's a pleasure having you here. It's a pleasure having you here. Now, you and I were talking, and I want to let the audience in on our little conversation. Creative Passion Results. Where did you come up with that title?
Well, originally I had a Creative Passions radio show, terrestrial radio in my market. I'm in the Dallas-Fort Worth area in Dallas, Texas. And then when the internet came on, we did a internet radio show. And so we could still kind of call it Creative Passions Radio, CPR. Okay. CPR for creatives. If you're pursuing your publishing passion, a purpose passion, a professional passion, or a performing passion, you know, we want to encourage you. So my show is all about giving people success tips. So instead of pressing their pain points, I mean, we do talk about the obstacles, and we talk about, you know, some of the challenges. If you're a publisher, for instance, you're an author, or you're a musician, or a movie maker, if you're in business, or you maybe have an education, environmental nonprofit, or a youth organization, whatever that might be, you have some struggles, but we also want to talk about the successes.
Yeah.
Because we hear over and over again, you know, I had so many people tell me over the last, I hate to tell you how long, 30 years or more, that they couldn't follow their creative passion because they couldn't make any money at it. You know, somebody always was discouraging them, and it's probably somebody close to them. That's what's astonishing to me. The people that love us the most are the ones that really try to pour water on our dreams. And so we're here, and my show is all about don't let anybody steal your dream.
I love it.
And the other problem is some of us have more than one passion.
True.
You know, it took me a lot of years to understand that it was okay. It's okay to have more than one passion. Yeah. Now, can you do them all at one time? Probably not. You know, you need to focus, especially if you've got a business passion.
Yeah.
Because in business, you've got to focus. You've got to, you know, you've got to do the one thing, do that well. And once you've done that well with that particular audience that you want to work with, I think you mentioned earlier, people don't know their audience. We have the same problem with book publishing. That's what I do in my real life.
Wow, okay.
This is my volunteer. My other job. This podcast is my other job because I just am so interested in people. I'm so curious about people and why they do what they do. And I wanted to give them a platform to share what they love to do, what their passion is. And then they're going to be a mentor or an influence, as you talk about, or a thought leader for somebody that's listening. Because there's somebody listening to you and there's somebody listening to me, and they want to, but they don't believe they can. So we create the space so that they can believe. We believe enough in them right now until they can believe. Okay. And so that's what we do. We create and hold that space for creatives, people that have a creative passion or creative ideal or business or thought. A lot of times it's already a hobby for us.
Yeah, yeah.
We just don't know how to monetize it.
Exactly.
One way you can monetize it is through a podcast. And I'm sure you're going to talk more about that. And I'm sure you talk a lot about that when you're sharing your tips.
I'll have you talk about it in a minute. I want to ask you, now you said you had a terrestrial radio show. And when you started podcasting, did you bring some of that same audience with you?
Well, a little bit, but not really, because we had a hiatus, you know, because the station where we were doing was an urban, like a, you know, urban kind of nonprofit station. So community station, and they just lost funding. Gotcha. And so, you know, we lost a space to have our show, a studio where we could go in and do our show, because it used to be a lot harder. You know, this was probably 10 years ago. You know, we didn't have access to as many platforms like we do today.
Yeah, true.
And that's what happened for me. I wanted to get back into it. I wanted to do another show. I kind of wanted to keep the creative passions, but I was having a problem with the R, you know, because it's not really radio anymore, you know, because it's internet. Yeah. And so what do we do with that R? And so I looked up all kinds of words. I got out the thesaurus and the dictionary and you know, and finally came up with results, because that's what it's about for us. It's encouraging people to be successful, to take whatever steps they have to take. Yes, there are going to be obstacles, but you can always overcome that obstacle.
True.
You know, if it's time, you know, time's about the only obstacle we can't overcome. Money, we can overcome. Yeah. Technology, we can overcome. You know, if you just keep working at it, you know, eventually you can build your audience.
You're right, and Liz, I like that what you just said about your audience because a lot of people who are starting podcasts right now, that is one of their biggest concerns. Well, I don't have an audience. You
Right.
build it.
Right. That's right.
You build
Yeah,
it.
so we basically started over, so I had to start over basically from zero because it's moving to internet. And a lot of those same contacts and people. Now I still have, a few sponsors, and I still had a few people I could go back to and say, hey, we're redoing. If you have any interest, can we send you a proposal? And they were like, yeah, sure. We always want to know what you're doing.
Right.
COVID-19 obviously got a lot of things on hold. So a lot of people that had planned to do some things
Yeah.
kind of got held up. But I said, I'm going to go ahead. I found the Anchor FM platform, which is one of the platforms that you can use. And it was so easy. I was up in like 30 minutes or an hour. I had my first couple of legend shows. I pulled some shows from my previous shows and kind of segmented them. So, so I had like 6 shows to kind of start with.
Smart.
And, they were like 30 minutes because we had actually gone a little bit long. One of them was an actor who was a 10-generation storyteller, and he was just hysterically funny, and he had all these stories about growing up in Austin, Texas. And his mother was actually the caterer for Lady Bird Johnson and Lyndon Johnson when they were in the White House, and when they were in the state, Texas, when they were in the governor's mansion. And so, he said we never knew who was going to be sitting at the breakfast table when we came down for breakfast.
Yeah, that's kind of cool, though.
Because his parents were fairly, his family was, his father was the first, his grandfather was the first judge to handle discriminatory cases and to be a lawyer for an attorney for people who had been, disenfranchised.
Yeah.
And they had this, mother and dad had opened the first restaurant that was segregated.
Wow.
All other restaurants were segregated. Their restaurant was not segregated, and they allowed anybody and everybody to come in and participate and eat dinner and whatever. And because his grandfather was the judge, they didn't get a lot of flack. They got flack, but they always pushed back.
Right. Now let me ask you on that question right there. Was it difficult for you at any point in getting guests for your podcast?
It's not difficult to get guests. It is hard to kind of schedule it and keep up with the schedule. That's kind of the hardest thing because, so I kind of try to stay. Right now we're recording and then posting. Hopefully in 2021, I'm hoping to go live and do live streaming again, which is kind of what we had with the regular radio. We were able to live stream and take those questions. But with the recording, I can stay about 4 weeks ahead.
Right.
But through the holidays, I'm back.
You're back to square one,
Here we go again. We're 2 weeks into the new year, and it's like, God, I got to get those other 2 edited. I got to get those podcasts edited and loaded, but I'll get them done this week because it's so much easier.
Well, you brought up something that's very important. I'm sure a lot of people want to know what are the differences between live streaming it and recording it from a podcaster standpoint.
Well, I think, like you said, on the live stream, you can actually take the questions right there. When you're recording, you either have to put it on Facebook or some social media, or you have to take questions ahead of time. You have to say, here are my guests for the next 4 weeks. If you'd like to ask a question of them, send it in to me, send it in ahead of time or post it in our Facebook comments on our Facebook page.
Yeah.
You got to do a little more work.
Yeah.
But once you load, whatever platform you load on, a lot of the platforms, then send it out to multiple platforms. Like Anchor sends it out to 8 other people. So it's Spotify, it's iTunes, it's it's PBS, it's an RSS feed that, you can put in your blog and all your other posts. And it's really easy to edit. They give you a real simple editing process that even I could do. So if I can do it, any of the rest of your listeners listening, y'all can do it too. It's that easy. And there are a lot of other platforms that are great too. And I'm sure maybe you do sometimes, like you say with your pro and con thing, which is great.
Yeah.
Give people those options. But I would say just start. Do it.
Thank you.
Don't be intimidated. We tell the same people. People ask me all the time, well, how do I start writing? Start writing. I know that sounds simple, but get a piece of paper,
but it's a simple answer.
And a pen if you have to, and write, or sit at your computer and start typing about any subject that you have, like you say, that you're an expert at, or that you want to be an expert at.
You'd be amazed at how some people, like you just said, the answer's right there in front of them, but they're looking for something complicated.
Right.
They're looking for a complicated answer. And I've known, and I'm sure you have too, I've known people who on their first try hit a home run with something.
Right.
Yeah, they tried to do something and it was great and people loved it and they're like, wow, okay, I can do this and I've been procrastinating all this time.
Right. Yeah. I finally got with the publishing. I was in advertising for 25 years and I've been helping people publish throughout the last 8 or 9 years because I had friends taken advantage of so drastically financially with vanity presses. Mm-hmm. I just got really mad and I said, that's it. I'm going to do something about this. But as far as the other stuff, you've got to know you got to know who you want to help.
Yeah.
And it's got to be somebody you want to help because a podcast, a book, anything you're doing, that's going to take time. You're going to have to you may be in that for a year, 2 years, 3 years. I mean, even if it doesn't take you that long to write, but I got people that say it's 7 years. I'm like, it doesn't take 7 years.
Right. Now, Liz,
let's finish.
Let's say I'm a brand new podcaster and I want to ask you, how do I monetize it? What do you say?
Oh, well, that's obviously the slowest, hardest part. I mean, if you can get a sponsor, I mean, that's your best bet. The problem with a sponsor, they want to know how many listeners you got. So if you can't bring them listeners, you got to bring them something else. Well, what else can you bring them? Are they connected to somebody with a reputable reputation? Is it somebody that maybe got into some trouble and now they're trying to get out and they need some positive press or positive whatever. And, if they're way down the road, you don't want to get involved with them. But, if they were on the edge or they fell into something accidentally they didn't mean to get into and it was bad, that can happen to all of us. But, you can sell ads on your podcast. That's the easiest thing. But you got the same thing. You may have to start at $25.
Yeah.
And then work your way up to $250, because you're not going to be able to go to somebody direct unless you've already got those shows packaged up or unless it's somebody that you're having on a guest.
Yeah.
And that guest has influence.
And one of the things that I say to people, a lot of times I said, I know we want to get these big corporate sponsors, but sometimes your local business may be ready, willing, and able. Local
insurance company, your local CPA, lawyers. I have a lot of law firms.
A lot more if they go to terrestrial radio.
Right. Exactly. So. That's exactly right. And sometimes they're looking for a targeted audience too.
True.
And they'll pay more. They don't care if it's 10,000 people. They're just looking for 100 of the right people.
Yeah.
And if they can get in front of 100 of the right people and 10% of those people or 5% of those people do something or take some action and you need to have a call to action in whatever you're doing.
Very true.
So that, they actually call the number or they actually email or they actually do something that you want them to do. And that's another thing that people don't think through. You got to do a little planning.
Yeah, that's true.
Plan to be in this space. You got to do a little planning, unless you're going to just get on and talk yourself, which you can do that too. You can just talk about a subject, like you say, a 15-minute podcast where you just take a tip every day. Like I could do a Creative Passions tip, and I could just get on myself every day and share a tip. But I just like to engage with people.
We'll be waiting for your tips now.
That's right. And it might be in the back of my mind.
There you go.
Like you say, it's gotten so much easier. But when I was talking about Creative Passions, what I write about is multicultural Western history. I write about Black cowboys and Buffalo soldiers because I was the historian for the largest multicultural rodeo in the country. And people go, oh my God, that's completely different than publishing or advertising or entrepreneurship.
I'm definitely going to have to get some of your books. So that's definitely something I definitely want to get into.
Now, I was a white girl like you, man. How are you? Biggest black rodeo in the country, but it's actually cowboys of color, so it's cowboys of all colors.
I like that though. I'm definitely
African American and Native American.
I'm definitely interested in that. Now, before I let you go, I want to have you please let everyone know the name of your podcast and where they can find you, please.
Okay, so it's Creative Passions Results, and it's Liz Lawless. So if you go to iTunes or you go to Spotify or you go to one of those platforms, you can just type it in. You could probably just type in Liz Lawless, and it's probably going to come up. Or if you type in Creative Passions in the search bar, it's going to come up. It's going to be listed under business. because most of what we're talking about are people that are trying to monetize their passion, whether that's an author or a musician or a filmmaker or a business entrepreneur.
Mhm.
And even the nonprofits, they're trying to reach people. They've got to have money. They got to have funding to,
Exactly.
to put their program out in the community and help the people they want to help. So that's the best way. It's if you go to Anchor, it's www.anchor.fm /biz the number 4 creatives, biz for creatives, because that's our parent company.
Fantastic.
So this is basically, a show under our parent company in case we decide to do another show later on about Western history creative thinking.
I like it a lot. So Liz, thank you so much for being on a Productive Podcast for today. And guys, hold on. She's not going anywhere because she's going to stick around for our next segment, which of course is PodQuest, where we're going to take a question from one of our audience members. So stay right there. We'll be right back with more of the Productive Podcaster.
You've heard the rumblings. You've even thought of starting your own. But how? Everybody knows podcasting is the fastest and best way to get your message out and grow your business all at once. Although everybody knows this, nobody showed you what to do. Well, Podcast Nation is ready to do all the heavy lifting for you while you just deliver your message and grow. Join the nation and start your podcast today. Text podcast to 929-244-4323 and make them hear your voice.
Do you hear what I hear? That's the sound of your tribe, your audience, your people. That's the sound of your nation. The people who love to hear the sound of your voice as you bring your special message to them in your very own podcast. How do you get it to them? Let us handle that. We're Podcast Nation, and we make sure they hear your voice. Podcast Nation is a full-service podcasting firm that does all the hard work for you so you can be the talent and get your message to your people. Just text podcast to 929-244-4323 and talk to one of our staff on how you can get started with your very own done-for-you podcast. Or just go to podcastnation.com and get started today. That's PODCAST nation.com. Your people are waiting on you. Make them hear your voice. Podcast Nation.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Productive Podcast. Wasn't Liz great? She was fantastic. And guess what? She is still here for our next segment, which is called PodQuest.
PodQuest.
PodQuest, where we're going to take a question from one of the audience members. And today's question, Liz, I'm going to give it to you first. The question is, what is the best microphone to use? So I'll let you take it first.
Well, I've used a Bose, a BOISE, Bose thing. Today they've got so many that are fabulous. Hopefully you can answer that question better than me. Technology's not my top of my mind, and that's why it took me so long to jump back into podcasting.
Well, you know what? I first of all, I always say this. I'm not going to sit here and tell what type of mic to use for a couple of reasons. One, because you may find one that you like better than someone else likes one.
Right.
Yeah. The other thing is, they're not paying me.
Right.
They're not paying me to plug their microphone. I mean, I have 3 mics sitting around me right now that all are different brands.
Right.
So it depends on what I needed and how I like the sound. If you like the sound, then go for it.
Right.
That's the best advice I have for you. I'm sure it's probably not what you were looking for. I'm not going to tell you what you should use. So that's
right. You can try it. Try one.
Right.
And again, like you say, at $49, $59, $69, even $100.
They're not that expensive. Right.
I mean, if you don't like it, you can throw it out or give it to somebody else that's starting.
Or use it for your co-host. So either way. However you want to do it. But Liz, I want to thank you again for being a guest on the Productive Podcaster. Once again, tell everyone the name of your podcast and where they can find you.
Okay, great, Barrett. Thank you so much. It's Liz Lawless, and it's called Creative Passions Results. And it's on all of the platforms, Spotify, iTunes, Anchor, and you could probably just search my name or Creative Passions Results Podcast, and we should show up there. So thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure, and talking. I'm learning. You always learn something.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for joining me. So I appreciate that so much. So guys, that was Liz Lawless. And guess what? We got another segment coming up on the show. That's right. We weren't done with the Productive Podcaster. Not just yet. So after some of you have a question. I can hear it right now. Your question is, how do I get my question answered on the Productive Podcaster? Well, it's very simple. Join our Facebook group, the Productive Podcaster. That's right. The Productive Podcaster. Join our Facebook group and engage. And when I say engage, this is not for you to promote your podcast or whatever business you have. It's actually to talk to people, engage, ask questions, find out some things, and we'll be glad to help you with your podcast and learning some things about it and get your questions answered. Now it's time for our podcast profile. This is where I actually tell you about a podcast that I listen to or I think that you may want to listen to as well. And this one is called Morning Mindset by Carrie Green. Morning Mindset by Carrie Green. Something to get you in the right frame of mind each day. Morning Mindset by Carrie Green. It's a good podcast to listen to get your mind, get your spirit right. Now, the next segment we have is one of my favorites. It's the podcast giveaway. It's the giveaway, meaning someone is going to get a prize. One of our loyal listeners. This one is going to Ezra Shiflett. Ezra Shiflett. Thank you, Ezra, for listening. You are going to get this door hanger. It's a plastic door hanger. It's not paper. So you can put it on your door to tell people to leave you alone while you're recording. So you get that. Now, you're wondering out there, I hear you. How can I get a giveaway? Once again, join the Productive Podcaster Facebook group. Once you do that, we will be more than happy to pull out a name and find out who we can give a prize to. And we have come now to my favorite part of the podcast, my favorite part of the Productive Podcaster. And that is Pod Quote, where we take a productivity quote and give it to you before we go. Today's quote, again, comes from D.D. Artner. We did a D.D. Artner quote a while ago. Well, this quote is, don't interpret anything too much. This is time waster number one. I'm going to say that again. Don't interpret anything too much. This is time waster number one. So don't waste time trying to overinterpret things. We know we do that from time to time. So guys, that wraps up today's episode of the Productive Podcast. I want to thank my guest, Liz Lawless, for joining me today. And I want to thank you for joining. And as I say, always share this out. Let everyone know to pay attention to the Productive Podcast. You can find us on iTunes, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeartRadio. We're there, and also on YouTube. You can see us there as well. Thank you guys for joining me. As I always say before I sign off, don't just settle for being awesome. Set your goal to all them all. And take action, everybody. We'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us on the Productive Podcaster. Be sure to join us next time for another great show. We welcome your engagement, so make sure you participate by joining the Productive Podcaster Facebook group and chime in. Also, share the Productive Podcaster with some of your friends right now. If you have a podcast and you're looking for guests, or if you would like to be a guest on a podcast, join our podcast exchange at www.podcastworlddirectory.com. We'll see you next time.